Welcome to the Cybersecurity Connection. In this episode, we will explore jobs with ACI, and we will talk about the job searching and resumes. As always, I always bring you at least one junior role or other cyber IT related roles. If you look under the video, there are links to various content we will discuss during this live discussion. My guest tonight is John Bryan. Over to you, John.
Good. Thank you for having me on the show, Justin.
A little bit about yourself.
As you mentioned, my name's John Bryan. I've got two first names, so it's not too terrible for people to find. So anyone watching the show, feel free to find me on LinkedIn, because even if we don't have something that matches, there's a good chance I'm connected to a recruiter that does. But about me more generally, I've been with ACI since 2014, since we were just a teeny tiny company of 3 people. We've got about 200 contractors now across the planet. 2 in Japan, South Korea, 38 states. So relative to a lot of your guests, I'm sure we're probably small potatoes. But our main focus is in the secret cleared DoD IT environment. We have some uncleared cyber work, which you have a listing up for that as well. So if you don't have a clearance, we can certainly still provide some, I hope, good insight as to what you need to do to get into cyber, because that's what everyone wants to do, and it's a tough field to crack into, as I'm sure you've covered on previous episodes. But that's just a little about me in a nutshell. I've been doing recruiting for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, and they're always learning something new. So I'm sure I'm going to learn just as much from this as the viewers will, certainly.
Well, let's run right into it like I always do. So the very first question we're going to discuss is, what are some tips on job searching specifically to the cybersecurity related jobs that you kind of see that kind of help push those candidates into the right jobs and things like that?
That's an excellent question, and one thing we deal with constantly, because not only are we trying to recruit people into cyber roles, but we have, like I said, 100 something contractors on different IT programs that want to move up on the program to a cyber position. So navigating how to get them into a cyber position is something that we deal with in our training and advancement group, and it's a challenge. One thing I would recommend is identify. I mean, there's no reason to reinvent the wheel, right?
Yep.
So identify somebody either from a training school you went to or a professional connection that's maybe a little farther along than you are, and see exactly what their job title evolution has been. In particular, I would key in on what was their job title before their job title had cyber in it, right before, kind of that proto-cyber position. Because that's the toughest thing to do. I mean, you'll see positions that have, like, for example, on our project, we're working on a huge Navy Marine program where there's a job title called Cybersecurity Specialist Junior. And it's kind of goofy that it has junior at the end. It sounds like a little, Fisher-Price, Little Tikes type job or something. But the challenge is they want you to have 2 years of some relevant cybersecurity system for the junior position. So it's not really entry level. And I'm sure that your viewers encounter this all the time, where it'll be a cyber position. It'll list itself as a junior or the lowest rung. But in practice, cyber positions are a lot like pizzas, where there's not really a small on the menu, right? It starts at medium and keeps going. So the positions you would want to be interested in potentially are, what is the small pizza, right? What is something that's cyber adjacent, where you're going to be working alongside those systems, but that's not going to be your primary job function. That way, when you go to apply for that cyber role and they need to see something like host-based security systems or ACAS or whatever that particular cyber environment system is, or any cyber system, you can say, well, I haven't worked on it explicitly as my main job. I have worked alongside it for 2 years. So that would be, I guess, my biggest, token or nugget, if you will, having done this for some time, is try to find what did all these people do before their first cyber job and try to emulate that in your particular area of focus.
Yeah, like you pointed out, with the whole pizza and things like that, there's paths that hundreds of thousands of tens of thousands, because there's roles out there that are being filled daily. So there's paths that are out there. It's just, hey, what path do you need to jump on to actually land that next role, because that CTO or whoever didn't just, hey, wake up one day and have that position. So, they built up that resume. And what I liked about LinkedIn is you can kind of glean on what people have if they're truthful. There's some special ones on there, but you can kind of see that trajectory. They completed that college degree or certification or something like that, and they either moved up inside their own company or they transposed into other ones to keep that that rung going. So that's a good point with the whole pizza with the whole different size. I might have to actually take that from now on.
Feel free to steal it. I mean, I do it all the time. If someone's got like a good approach to something, we'll absorb it into our system, and I think any information technologist is going to do the same thing, right? If the code works, don't change it. So for cyber, it's unique in the IT space, I think, because nobody really minds if you have a technician and you consider them to be entry level with no experience, right? But the person in charge or even participating in your information assurance apparatus, you don't want that person to have zero experience or to be new at any point. So that may be why the quote-unquote entry-level cyber positions tend to be a little bit more like a medium or a mid type of role.
Because there's that trust level that you're trying to build,
Yeah.
and you want to make sure that it's not just a technical trust, it's actual trust in the person. It's that they've been in the field for X amount of years or a time period. They're not just coming in and touching systems that you are very worried about, to say the least.
Yeah, and the thing is, I don't know what I don't know enough about the market space in general to give you a really, really specific answer. But every organization has their own coding, right? So if you wanted to work for a large company that's got a bunch of cybersecurity positions, I would look at the people that worked in that company internally and advanced from position X to the cybersecurity position, Y, the lowest rung cyber role, and you can get an idea of, okay, this is what the cyber zero would be, or pre-cyber, essentially. They're not going to call the job that. But in practice, if this is the particular track that people that moved into cyber followed, again, if it's not broken, don't fix it. And every organization has a position or positions like that because they need to train their cyber personnel too. They need to be able to pipeline people into that. And it's easier to train somebody in-house without having the cyber in the job title and the dollars that comes with it than if you try to grab somebody from the open market for an entry-level type position.
And that's a good point. So let's roll right into that whole public trust that we started with at the very beginning. Can we elaborate a little bit on, let's not look too much into this whole 10 years of experience, bachelor, stuff like that. Let's say this was a junior row. It said public trust is needed. Let's say I am looking to apply. I just graduated college. I've not had any clearances, things like that. What do I kind of need? Can I just apply for this job, or what kind of do I need to do?
Yeah, so public trust is interesting because most of the clearances, the process to get one is pretty straightforward. Public trust is a little bit leaner in so far as you only need it for most non-DoD entities, that's technical. Anything outside of the defense and intelligence arena, if you're going to work for a government agency as a full-time employee, you'll probably have public trust. You may have sensitive, like I was an intern with the Department of Commerce, and they gave me sensitive, which is essentially if I spilled my entire guts, it might cause one problem. Public trust is if you're not, you don't have any outstanding criminal background. If you can get a job at almost any regular place of employment, you'll probably find with public trust. If you have a lot of North Korean gambling debt or something like that, that may pose a problem. But in general, public trust is not going to be, I wouldn't consider it to be a hurdle. If you got a clean background, and actually in the example you're providing, where you're someone right out of school, you have an advantage because you have a shorter background history, so your background vetting and check is going to be a lot shorter, right? We run background checks every day, and the more places you live, the more points of address and countries you've lived in and everything else, the longer your history, the more elaborate and involved your background check will be. So if you've only lived in Nebraska for your entire life and you just got out of school, you're going to be an easier public trust person to get because your background is going to be a lot. I mean, I wouldn't let that stop you if you do have a more colorful background, but at the end of the day, public trust, for most of these positions, what's unwritten is it's really must be able to attain public trust rather than have public trust on day one.
And see,
Now,
that's a key point that I want to stress to the viewers out there. Just because it's on there doesn't mean you can't apply for it and possibly have a role within, a few weeks, a month or so like that. It's not a, hey, secret or something like that. That's a 6 month, a year out role,
right.
and typically only held for certain entities, like if you're senior levels, things like that. So if you have CISP and all these other crazy things, acronyms behind your names, and you don't have that clearance, a lot of companies will front that clearance for you because you're that very finite item that they're not waste, but they're spending that 6 months a year on to get you onboarded, things like that. So that's a piece of it.
Public trust is nice too because, and obviously ACI, we're probably too small for this to be appropriate, but in general, if you got a public trust job with a blue chip government contractor, like, huge, a Northrop Grumman, a Lockheed, or somebody like that, right? And your public trust at that point, they've got a security office that's bigger than our entire company, where they can get you a clearance in parallel to you working in a public trust job, right? So public trust is kind of the gateway to getting secret. Now, one thing I would want your viewership to take away from this discussion is, while it says able to obtain public trust means anyone that can get it is a candidate, the opposite is not true with secret. And the reason I say that is if it says must be able to obtain secret or something to that nature, what that really means is we will review every secret cleared candidate first. In the event that no one exists in the known universe that has an active secret, then we will go to that next set.
And that's that whole piece we were talking about, that finite. Typically junior, maybe even mid-level, there's so many people out there that have that clearance that you have a big pool to pull from. But as you go up that pyramid, it's a little bit harder to grab that candidate. So like you said, you pull from a pool, but as that pool dries up, you're more willing to do secret, top secret, things like that, clearances for different companies, of course.
Yeah. I mean, and sometimes they'll say, so the language in the job description is telling, right? So ability to attain secret clearance, if it says just ability to obtain secret clearance, that tends to mean they prefer people have clearance on day one. If it says something like ability to obtain secret clearance within X amount of time, that suggests that they're actually going to clear people right off the street, which is good. If you're looking to get a clearance right out of the gate, that's fantastic. So the language they use is important. But something like this, where it's public trust, allows you to get into a space doing something that is, quite frankly, analogous to what you'd be doing in a cleared role. This is a public trust cybersecurity position, but instead of you working for the Army, the end client in this case is the Department of Veteran Affairs. So obviously the systems are not quite as sensitive, but at the end of the day, the functions are very similar.
And that's something else, like we were saying, right? So this gets you into the door, and then there might be that secret or top secret role that you could keep, go into after this, So this is like that, hey, knock on every single door. That's what I would tell every single viewer, everyone on LinkedIn, everyone I meet. Knock on doors. There's going to be a door that's going to open up and let you come through. But if you're not knocking on doors, you don't know that it's going to open or not. So until you knock, like I brought in John Bryan just now, and there's all these positions that he has available right now. So that's that whole knocking on doors. I went around and knocked on a lot of doors to get these people on. So definitely leverage this platform.
And where possible, figure out where everyone is going and then go the other way. And what I mean by that is the entire federal government is an enormous bureaucracy. There's tons and tons of different departments, and they all need cybersecurity support, right? It might not be as sexy to work as a cybersecurity specialist with the Department of the Interior, but guess what? It's a great job. They're going to pay you pretty much the same. It's not going to be as competitive. You may move up faster. So there's advantages to being potentially larger fish in a slightly smaller pond than getting the cybersecurity position at the Pentagon where you have to deal with traffic, right? So don't immediately discount something if it doesn't fit your guy in a van in a spy movie type of cyber work, right? You can pen test any network. So don't discount the non-DoD non-intelligence positions. If anything, they're going to be hurting for people more because if you do have a clearance and there's a position you're qualified for that's over at Department of Energy and you don't have a Q clearance, DOE probably can't hold your top secret. So you're not eligible for that, or you're eligible for it, but you don't want to lose your top secret. So you're locked into that ecosystem. It's kind of like the Android, Apple scenario, where if you have a clearance, you want to stay in that pool. So you can leverage your non-cleared status as an advantage, going after positions that are uncleared where they can't hold the clearance, because everyone that's got one probably isn't going to want to apply for it. I can't say that's the case all the time, but there's definitely positions that's the case.
So we had a question about this DGGS-A analyst journeyman
Yes.
from one of my guests. So basically, they want to kind of know what that journeyman is. Is that entry level? What does that actually mean with ACI Federal?
Okay, so this one is interesting because we have so we're a partner with Mantech. So you would actually go on to work for Mantech after a certain period of time, but we have you get to bypass all of their regular application machinery if you go through us, which is nice. We can essentially hand deliver you to them. But that's why this listing, if you look at it and you compare it to Mantech's website, it's going to be identical. So the journeyman language is actually theirs. This is a unique position for us because most of the stuff you work for us, become an ACI employee. But they were really hurting for folks that had this particular skill set. DSIGS is a Army intelligence drone information system. At least that's how it's been explained to me. But the journeyman is kind of at I want to say it's kind of like the medium pizza thing I was talking about. Like it's the lowest level, but it's not entry level. But if you've got that kind of DSIGS experience, feel free to send us an email anyway, because that is a niche military program. And for anything that has a hyphen and then a particular sub-branch or particular department designation, so like DSIGS A for the Army, or if something that's AF or an N or whatever, even though there are analogous ones in other branches, whenever possible, they like to know people that speak their language. So soldiers like to hire, folks that have just got out of the Army. And sailors like to do the same thing, Air Force the same thing. Even if it's almost the same thing, they prefer to go with their own where possible. That's not to say don't apply, but your strongest advantage is going to be in whatever organization you have experience with, if that makes sense. Especially if it's a specific program like that. Shoot.
So I had another question. So how often do you see this whole public trust or the whole not really needing a clearance per se that you see? Do you see onesies, twosies? How often should I'm sure people should visit the website almost daily, but how often would you say you would see maybe a few like junior to maybe mid-level roles that pop up that are public trust, that are cyber or IT based?
So my answer isn't going to be reflective of the market. So I just want to kind of put that caveat in there, because I like to say that we're omnivorous. We'll chase whatever opportunity we have available to us. We've got a project where we're doing social work for sheltered children in Homestead, which is totally out of our traditional focus area, but we could do it. So with that caveat, we do have, as I mentioned, that Cerner program coming down the line where there's going to be a lot of public trust, uncleared work, because it's with the Department of Veteran Affairs. So in that case, the data to date is not reflective of the future opportunities with us in the cyber and the uncleared IT space. We do have some uncleared development-focused stuff that's with the Social Security Administration up in Baltimore. So you may see some Baltimore listings on there, or actually I think it says Woodlawn, Maryland. Those tend to be a little bit higher level than your IT specialist or a help desk variety type roles. But again, like I said at the beginning, I recognize that as a fairly small government contractor, we're not going to have an opening for everybody, but at the end of the day, everybody still needs a job, right? So if you look through my entire 12,000 connections and there's somebody in there that you want to meet, let me know. If I can spend 5 seconds and write out a recommendation or something like that to get you moving forward, why not? And then maybe someday, possibly, who knows, somebody that's got a Sec Plus and a clearance, you send them my way. and that's
Yeah.
how it works.
So
Pass the
yeah,
paper.
that's a piece that I always stress to each viewer today and in the future. All that is actually below the video, his contact on LinkedIn. So you don't even have to search for him on LinkedIn. He's right there. Click on him. You can connect with him right now. Start messaging him.
So I
And
can do the whole YouTube thing, right? Like if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and
yes.
subscribe.
Oh, and subscribe. I always forget about the
Yeah.
subscribe piece, so I do need to
Nice.
start doing that a little bit more. And also his the job board and things like that are down there. And of course, your majority of y'all are connected with me, so definitely ping me if you need details that you're not seeing. So I do have a couple more questions on here. So Ryan, which I think this always comes up from time to time. Companies typically will hire people with the clearances because it's easier to train that person than to pay for that clearance and wait for that time. So let's say you don't have that security plus, or you don't have that certain cert or that certain background. Because you have that clearance, you have a higher chance than someone that doesn't have the clearance of getting the interview and landing the job. Do you see that any truth in that, or is that kind of
Like most things, it's a little of both. And what I mean by that is for us, the backlog on getting people cleared through the National Background Investigative Bureau, or NBIB, which we're actually doing a contracting project to provide investigators for that, to help with that project. But because the backlog is like 6 months or around that neighborhood, it's cost prohibitive for us to put people in place that won't be able to start in that period of time. And for most of the missions we're supporting, where they need network support tomorrow, it's not going to work out, to have someone teed up that far in advance. So it's a foot in the door for sure. However, and this is kind of unique to the Department of Defense, and I'm sure someone's spoken about this on your show before, but the DoD 8570 standard rather, is pretty much hard and fast. You have to have this certification on day one, or we're not going to let you touch a Department of Defense network or equipment. So in the space that I work in, if you have like information assurance technician level 1, have you guys talked about this before, or should I?
No, you can go ahead. No, go ahead into it. I like to expand because I have different points of views for each
Okay.
person. I'm feeding some chat right now.
Yeah. So the short version is there's always the person with the asterisk that says, well, technically you don't need to have Sec Plus on day one, and technically you'd be correct. However, the challenge is every contract has to meet a certain percentage of the personnel have to be compliant with this standard. So for safety's sake, and because there's enough of these people running around, they really don't waive that credential on day one unless you're really, really lucky or it's a really high need, and then they'll waive it for like a month. But in practice, you have to have those certifications, and you can just look up DoD 8570. Those are access-related certifications. You have to have those on day one. And those are certifications like CompTIA A+, Net+. Most of your viewers in the cyber domain are going to be interested in Security Plus, and then CASP, which is the certified
CompTIA Advanced Security
CompTIA
Practitioner.
Advanced Security Practitioner. That's it. Yes.
So I have that one, so that's why I was.
Yeah, CASP. I would say for the mid or even ascending senior level professional, it's a fantastic bridge between Sec Plus and CISSP. Because it gets you access to the IAT Information Assurance Technician Level 3 work without you having to go through the CISSP headache at that phase, which depending on, did you do CISSP as well?
No, I do not have CISSP. That's my next.
Yeah.
That's my next.
Right. That's the next evolution.
Yep.
So in the past, it was like, people get all hung up on that or nothing, but that's not really the case. And you've done the right thing with the CASP, because that's going to open a lot more doors, and it's going to build your knowledge base. Now, one thing I do encounter a lot is people will go kind of cert heavy in their training, and they'll wonder why they can't get a cyber job on day one, which is like, I got certified ethical hacker and CASP and all of this, but I have 0 years of IT experience on my resume other than working at Best Buy. And the challenge is kind of, as I alluded to before, they're not going to hand you the keys to the network on day one. Which is where that unlisted cyber adjacent position comes in. So to circle back to answer your question in full, if you have a clearance, it is a huge asset. If it requires a certification and it says like Sec Plus or something along those lines, in that case, it's probably required for the first day of the job. Now, if you don't have it, but you're working on it, that's fine. You can go ahead and apply. We routinely have people we kind of put on the bench, and then right after they test, they text me or someone sends me an email, says I'm ready to go, and we snap them up. So most of the time, the certs are pretty important. Now, if it's something that's more niche as far as its focus, so something like a Microsoft certification or Cisco certification, or even like a VMware or something like that, where it's kind of ancillary to the main job itself, or it's just kind of solidifying and affirming you have certain knowledge in a specific field, then those they will usually, at their discretion, of course, be able to waive it for some period of time. So for like VMware stuff, we get people that they'll waive it for 6 months. For networking, they can waive the Cisco certs for some time. But the CompTIA ones, if they're part of that IAP family in the cleared space, you have to have. And make sure you do your continuing education, because people forget the CE, or they did the lifetime cert 20 years ago, and they get all upset that they're not eligible for positions now.
And that's the point. You really stress that point about being eligible and things like that. At this time, I'm going to kick it over, maybe one or two more questions, and then from there. So before I take any more questions, do you have any last comments, things of that nature, before we see if we have one or two more questions?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, Justin, what I would ask is, I mean, you've obviously done a lot of these, and what would be something that is the most common challenge that your viewers encounter, and if so, what are some of the suggested solutions, and then I'll try to build on whatever that is.
I think one of them is when they do the job hunting, they don't really, and I stress it, and I'm going to actually make a guide and things like that in the coming weeks. But one of the things is there's keywords. If you just, I showed it on a couple of videos previous to this. If you type in just cybersecurity, you're not going to get all the jobs that are cybersecurity related. Because you might have a security analyst or something like that. There might not even be cybersecurity in that actual role, but it actually requires that type of degree or those type of certs, but it doesn't even have it. So can you go a little bit more in depth in that about the whole job searching when you are talking about the cybersecurity market?
So I would actually say, and to make it a little more adversarial, I would say know your enemy, right? So pretend that you're a recruiter for a minute, and work backwards. So there's a gentleman, Glenn Cathy, who's fantastic. He's the head of talent acquisition over at Kforce, so enormous organization. And he's done a TED Talk on search strings and things like that. And Justin, you can probably cook something together as far as Boolean strings. But one thing that he's recommended when we look for candidates, which you can flip and go backwards and look for jobs, right? It's the same thing. Essentially is do a search for cyber, like do a search for what you want first. And then look at all the keywords that show up in that result, in that position, that don't have cyber in it. And build your kind of secondary iterative search from that. So let's say you did a search for like cyber. Actually, can we do this real quick? Can you do it on,
on your page?
Browser?
Yep.
Okay, we have the technology.
So search jobs.
So just go to like Google.
Well, I was just on your page, so I just typed in cyber.
I mean, there might not be enough to demonstrate it here, but.
Well, that's what I was doing. Was just basically right here and just showing.
Yeah, that's fine. Just click on the one that says tester.
Where at? Oh, okay, the bottom one.
Yep. Yeah. So let's say you do a general search for like cyber, and then you look at the position, which so you'll see things in here like security test, or you might see something like IA or information assurance, where there are phrases that are not specific to. It's not cyber, right? But it's a position that is a cyber role is going to include that language. Mm-hmm. So things like test manager, I mean, this is pen testing, but you can build up a bank of keywords for things that are not cybersecurity, right? Or it doesn't say cyber, it doesn't call it out, but it's the cyber function. So you click that first one, that's Deloitte, right? So you can click on that listing.
What I wanted to point out before we go into on the listings is see how like there's 42,000 jobs being posted for cyber, and that's just cybersecurity. That's not security analyst, all those other keywords. So knowing those keywords is a big part. So that's I think that's a really big part, right? Because I just typed
Yeah,
in
yeah. I mean,
cybersecurity, and the next thing I could type in is cybersecurity analyst, right? And then
oh yeah,
find jobs. There's 10,000 of those, you know.
there's a million ways to skin this cat. You can do cybersecurity, but you can get rid of the space, right? You can get really
Yep.
granular. You can do IA, or you can do information assurance. Um, and I would strongly recommend, and this is totally something you can do, is we can put together a Boolean search string, right? Like a grand unified theory of cyber search, where you just plug this bad boy in there, and it'll pull everything. So you could do cybersecurity, information assurance, testing, network security, because again, some of the positions you're looking for, if you're getting started in cyber, probably won't call cyber out as a job function. It'll be something like that small pizza we talked about,
Yep.
where it's going to be cyber adjacent. So you can put a whole bunch of keywords together, but I would try to pretty much build your search backwards. So instead of looking, at least at the beginning, for the jobs, I would start with the people, folks that have followed a similar track that you want to follow, see what their job titles are, their skills, and what they highlighted, and then go back to positions that are listed in cyber and grab keywords from there and pretty much build a not a job description, but a keyword bank out of the position that you're looking for. And that may not be cyber. That may be one of those pre-cyber positions where the keywords will be a little bit different.
And so to the viewers that are out, on right now, I'm actually, yeah, that's a great idea. I'm actually, if someone wants to send me some over on LinkedIn, some keyword searches or Boolean searches, and by this weekend, I'll throw up a little template for different jobs so we kind of like search for, so that people can start using that and sharing it out so that we can find those jobs that might be hidden, that people aren't actually finding.
Yeah, and I would totally poll your viewership on, okay, if you're working in cyber, what was the job you had right before you started in cyber? And some people will jump straight into something that's cyber junior or entry level, and that's fantastic. But the reason that this particular field is so unique is there's not a lot of them. It doesn't clearly delineate cyber 1, cyber 2, cyber 3 in the way that a lot of industries do. So I think getting an idea of what some of those job titles would be, what some of their functions were, would be helpful for people that are looking.
And so with that, it's about 8:30. I try to run about that 30-minute window. Any last couple little comments?
Oh, you mean from me?
Yeah, yeah. I'm good with the questions. I got all the questions in.
Okay. I guess the last thing that I would mention is, again, play to your particular resumes and background strength, because sometimes if people are unclear, they just kind of beat themselves up going after clear positions, which I understand the appeal, but at the same time, there's tons of other opportunities out there in both civilian and the uncleared government space for cybersecurity, penetration testing type of work. And between that, playing to whatever your resume strengths are, and your strengths may be the reverse. Instead of having a lot of experience but no clearance, you may have a clearance but not a lot of experience. In that case, you're going to want to get into a cleared position like a help desk or an IT specialist and you can talk to the hiring manager before, right? And see, am I going to be at least rubbing shoulders with the cyber folks? Am I going to have a chance to experience some of the cyber, not experience, but work alongside the information assurance team? Because that may not be listed in the description, but by the time you get to the interview phase, if you can figure out, is this a job where I'm going to be able to get some experience on the side to move into cyber, then that position may be worth a lot more than what the compensation is, if that makes sense. And that's something a lot of people don't ask, and that's a challenge that we deal with even with our full-time folks in the field now, is how do you get cyber experience if you don't have any? I think that's the biggest challenge, because we've got a lot of people that are supremely well trained. You got people that have CASP and CEH, and they can do everything, but they just haven't had a chance to do it in the field. And employers aren't going to give them, like for us, we don't make the call. It's up to whatever the Navy or the Marines or whomever wants to do. They don't want to give that responsibility to someone right out of the gate. So that's my end note, is think like a recruiter, follow what other people have done, if it works, steal it, and you know, never give up. Also apply on our website, and don't forget to like and subscribe. I covered it.
Thank you again, Brian, for spending this night with us. And again, I do want to see you back on next month if you see that this is a good avenue for you.
Yeah. My name's actually John, but it's John Bryan. I get that all the time, so not a big deal.
Yep.
But yeah, feel free to find me on LinkedIn, and you know, if you have any questions, or even have questions about resumes. It's, you know, I look at resumes all day, but you know, this is exciting. So feel free to, you know, send me something, and we'll see what we can do.
Awesome. And again, thank you for tuning into Cybersecurity Connection, where we connect you to a new recruiter focused on cybersecurity each and every night. Link to the job website and contact information is below. Again, please sub, and I will see you again tomorrow night. And on Thursday night, I will have a cybersecurity specialist inside of the automotive industry, and we may talk about a few accidents that have happened in the last couple of weeks. Thank you again for tuning in.